Have you ever heard of K-beauty? In the past 10 years, the success of the South Korean entertainment industry has popularized many aspects of South Korea's pop culture that are known around the world, such as BTS, Blackpink, the Gangnam Style song, and a lot of K-dramas. But back to K-beauty, when we talk about it, we refer to a series of trends, makeup, and skincare techniques, and also products that aim to promote the Korean beauty, which consist of perfect white skin, slim faces, big eyes, small noses, heart-shaped lips, and more. You might be wondering, is this working? Well, according to the Observatory of Economic Complexity, the makeup industry is one of the largest in the world. It ranked 68th in 2018 and perceived a growth of 5.5% last year. As stated by the International Trade Administration, South Korea represents 2.8% of this market, being the second top exporter of beauty products, just below France and upon the US. Nevertheless, these beauty standards are unreal and therefore hard to achieve. The big majority of beauty products in the world are destined to a female audience. In South Korea, this translates into the fact that by 2008, 20% of the South Korean women had undergone at least one aesthetic surgery. The most common ones are eyelid surgery, nose augmentation, and reduction of chin or cheeks. Stereotypes promoted in advertising, social media, television, and social pressure to achieve a perfect appearance are creating an entire structure that especially affects women. And for this reason, this investigation seeks to find out what is the origin of these beauty standards, the repercussions these stereotypes have had in women, and the counter responses to this situation. In the first place, in order to understand the current feminine gender stereotypes in South Korea, it is necessary to go back a bit in history, specifically to the arrival of Confucianism. The establishment of the Confucian system on the Korean peninsula had an enormous impact on gender roles. So much that even now, there is some agreement in the academy that the way in which Confucius' ideas were put into practice greatly favored a patriarchal system. But how did life change?
Before the arrival of Confucianism, during the Goryeo period, the family structure was not patriarchal. Men sometimes lived with their wives' families until the couple could obtain their own housing, and continuing the family line through daughters was an accepted practice. Also, women could inherit property and maintain control over it even upon marriage. In the case of being widowed, both men and women could remarry. However, with the implementation of Confucianism during the Joseon dynasty, various social reforms were carried out. When parents had not had male children, it became common to adopt men who belonged into the paternal lineage and to grant them inheritances. By 1474, the number of widows who remarried was considerably reduced, with the establishment of a law that prohibited the children of these marriages from participating in civil service exams. Subsequently, women began to be registered in the genealogy of their families after their brothers, when previously the registration was made based on the order of birth. Once married, the women's names were removed and added to their husband's family genealogy. A more recent example of Confucian practices is the Hoju system in South Korea. It consisted of a family registration mode in which all members of a family were registered under the head of this, which received the name of Hoju. Usually, the father was the Hoju and women could only assume this position when there were no other men left in the family. The abolition of this system was vital for feminists and other civil society groups. Despite the opposition of numerous Confucianists, this form of family registration was eliminated on January 1, 2008. Another aspect that affected women was the masculinization of the labor market in South Korea during the militarized dictatorships. In this period, companies began to view military service as work experience. It even gave higher salaries and better promotion opportunities to veterans. This situation marginalized women, limiting their opportunities and granting them lower salaries compared to men for the same amount and type of work. As a consequence, the female population left working life at an early age or upon marriage. In addition, women faced challenges as a society that encouraged them to be housewives and to be mothers only, but without even being able to decide how many children to have. The state financed associations that train women in housework and also encouraged family planning. Nevertheless, later on, the government began to promote the use of the intrauterine device and subsequently the surgical sterilization. This to prevent a large population from affecting the economic development. As a result, in 1988, 48% of fertile women were sterilized. Once the history of the role of the female gender is understood, we ask ourselves, which is the background of the current beauty standards?
Our research dates back to the Japanese colonial period. During those years, a feeling of anti-Japanese nationalism arose among the Korean population. As a consequence of the abuses suffered during this time, a desire to differentiate themselves physically from Japan was promoted in the country, and various works began to be published that presented the supposed physical characteristics that were only typical of Koreans. An example of these publications is the one made by the anthropologist Na Sejin that presented that Korean people had a long neck and a bright posture, an elongated face instead of a broad Mongoloid one, and greater strength compared to the Chinese and Japanese population. Consequently, the popularization of procedures to modify the physical appearance motivated by this ideology began. One of the surgeries that began to be performed was blepharoplasty, better known as double eyelid surgery, and which to this day is widely executed in South Korea. This surgical procedure seeks to obtain a specific type of eyes that is considered Korean, since removing too much adipose tissue from the upper eyelid can result in an unwanted Western appearance, which would attract criticism from society. Another moment that contributed to today's beauty standards was the 1997 Asian financial crisis. During this period, South Korea experienced a collapse in its national economy. As a result, the country suffered a drastic increase in the unemployment rate, which reached 6% in 1998, affecting 1.6 million people. The new economic situation, added to the competitiveness promoted by Confucianism to achieve a good standard of living, generated in the population a feeling of anguish towards the future. These factors, plus the common South Korean practice of requesting a photo of the individual in job applications, led to an increase in the number of cosmetic surgeries and in the consumption of personal image care products in general. People began to pursue beauty standards more intensely to have a better chance of finding a job in the face of increasing competitiveness in the labor market. Physical appearance became especially a necessity for women, since in the professional world, those who do not fit within the beauty norms may be discriminated, and usually when applying for a job, South Korean women are evaluated based on their appearance instead of their abilities, unlike men. Throughout these periods of Korean history and through various difficulties, women have tried to improve their quality of life on various occasions.
South Korean women's movement began during the 19th century as part of the liberation movement against Japanese domination. The then small group of women promoted female sexual exploration and liberation from patriarchal mandates. After the end of the Japanese occupation and the subsequent separation of Korea, various feminist organizations emerged, such as Korea Women's Association United, Korea United Women's Organization, the Christian Women's Group, Korean Women Link, among others. But they transferred the field of action to a sphere of political nature, focused on the establishment of democracy, national freedom, modernization, and the reunification of the peninsula. it was around the 90s that a gender perspective was formally incorporated and institutionalized among these organizations, producing a discourse on social and institutional oppression and discrimination against women, and initiating the urgency to achieve democracy and equal rights. In addition, the fight against sexual violence present in the socio-political sphere began, which is still a struggle on the current feminist movement. South Korean feminism has also not been indifferent to the beauty standards and stereotypes that women struggle with on a daily basis.
Within the patriarchal capitalist economy, beauty has become a measure of value imposed on women, replacing what was formerly motherhood and chastity. This concern for physical appearance is not innate. It is the expression of the power relations to which women have been subjugated in the patriarchal system. The myth of beauty is assimilated and internalized unconsciously by women and is constantly reproduced in all spheres of life, both public and private. Given the magnitude of this problem, South Korean feminist groups have decided to take various actions. At first, with the support of the Korean Women Link organization, a campaign was taken to the streets under the banner "Love Your Body the Way It Is," aimed at bombarding these practices that objectify women and devalue them socially and economically when their physical characteristics do not correspond to the stereotypes formed by the Korean media, the history, and the cosmetic industry.
Since 2015, the feminist movement has gained strength through social media. An example of the use of new technologies for activism is the movement against beauty standards called Escape the Corset. This initiative began in 2018 when the beauty blogger named Lina Bay removed all of her makeup in front of the camera while mentioning negative comments she had received for her physical appearance throughout her life. The name of the movement uses the corset, a garment that is characterized by being tight, uncomfortable, and even harmful, as a metaphor that symbolizes the oppression that beauty standards exert on women. Following this, several South Korean women have shared videos in which they are shown throwing away their cosmetic products. But South Korean women have also begun to reject not only makeup, but also certain types of clothing, diets, long hair, and even cosmetic surgeries. Between 2015 and 2018, women spent 53.5 billion South Korean won less on beauty products and cosmetic surgeries. Instead, they invested in cars and put their independence over objectification. In conclusion, it is identified that South Korean beauty standards greatly affect women because they were generated within a patriarchal social structure, where the intense competition for job opportunities results in beauty stereotypes as new means of oppression, against which South Korean women have been rebelling recently. This aspect of the feminist struggle goes beyond makeup. It is a proclamation against the social construction of femininity. The rejection of stereotypes frees women from a series of expectations that limit and pressure them from a young age. These efforts could represent the beginning of the end of the beauty myth, where putting on makeup, having cosmetic surgeries, waxing, and wearing heels is a choice, not an imposition.